Which fortress truly worked? What really happens when concrete, steel, and confidence collide with war? Today, we're taking a first look at 6 major World War II fortifications and ranking them from worst to best, not just by how scary they looked on paper, but by how they actually performed when the shooting started. Some were symbols of fear, others were expensive disappointments, and a few genuinely changed how wars were fought. Let's dive in together and see which defenses held strong and which ones cracked under pressure. Starting at the bottom, the Maginot Line. At first glance, the Maginot Line looked unbeatable. France poured billions of francs into this massive wall of bunkers, tunnels, artillery rooms, and underground railways along its eastern border. On paper, it was a masterpiece. Thick concrete, heavy guns, and soldiers living safely underground sounded like the future of defense. But war doesn't follow blueprints. When Germany invaded in 1940, they simply went around it through Belgium. The Maginot Line itself barely fell in battle, but that was the problem. It protected the wrong place. Despite its strength, it failed its purpose, and that's why it sadly sits at the bottom of our ranking.
A costly illusion, Singapore's coastal defenses. Moving slightly up, we arrive at Singapore, once called the Gibraltar of the East. The British believed it was impossible to take. Huge coastal guns pointed toward the sea, ready to smash any invading fleet. The issue was simple but fatal. The Japanese didn't come from the sea. They attacked through the jungle from the north. Many of those massive guns couldn't even turn far enough to face them, and some had the wrong type of shells. When Singapore fell in 1942, over 80,000 Allied troops surrendered. It was one of Britain's worst defeats, proving that a fortress is only as strong as its planning. Hit or miss, the Atlantic Wall. As we move higher, we reach Germany's Atlantic Wall. This was less a single wall and more a long chain of bunkers, guns, obstacles, and minefields stretching from Norway to France. Hitler hoped it would stop any Allied landing cold. In reality, it depended heavily on where you hit it. Some areas were lightly defended, others were deadly. On D-Day, places like Omaha Beach showed how dangerous the Atlantic Wall could be, causing thousands of casualties. But the Allies broke through within hours. It slowed them down, but it didn't stop them, placing it firmly in the middle of our ranking.
Stubborn and smart, the Siegfried Line. Next, we come to the Siegfried Line, also known as the West Wall. This German defensive belt faced France and later the advancing Allies from the west. It used dragon's teeth, bunkers, and overlapping fields of fire to make life miserable for attackers. Unlike the Maginot Line, it was flexible and backed by mobile forces. The Allies struggled against it in late 1944, especially in the Hurtgen forest, where fighting was slow and brutal. While it eventually fell, it delayed the Allies for months and did exactly what a defensive line should do. Frozen but fierce, the Mannerheim Line. Now we're getting into truly effective defenses. The Mannerheim Line, built by Finland to stop the Soviet Union, wasn't flashy or heavily industrial. Instead, it used terrain brilliantly. Forests, lakes, rocks, and cold weather became weapons. During the Winter War of 1939, Finnish troops used this line to hold off a much larger Soviet army for months. While the Soviets eventually broke through, the cost was enormous, with hundreds of thousands of casualties. For a small nation with limited resources, this was an incredible defensive success. The best of the best, Soviet defenses at Kursk. At the top of our ranking stands the Soviet defensive system at Kursk.
This wasn't just a line. It was layers upon layers of trenches, minefields, anti-tank guns, and strongpoints spread over hundreds of kilometers. The Soviets knew the Germans were coming and prepared deeply. When the Germans attacked in July 1943, they ran straight into the most prepared battlefield in history. Thousands of tanks clashed, and the German offensive collapsed. Kursk marked the last major German attack in the east. These defenses didn't just hold, they broke the enemy's strength and changed the course of the war. So when we look back, it's clear that the strongest fortifications weren't always the biggest or the most expensive. The best ones worked with terrain, intelligence, and flexibility. World War II taught us that walls alone don't win wars, but smart defense can decide them. And that's what makes these fortifications so fascinating to revisit even today.